Hi there, this is Linda and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. Today I'm going to share a flip through of my completed Hobonichi Cousin Avec January through June for 2025. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so I love that I have a completed journal for the first half of the year. I wasn't sure going into 2025 if I really liked the idea of doing the Avec system and having two books, because I really loved that in 2024 I had a full one journal for the entire year. But this year I have two, and you guys, I love it. First of all, you can see how chunky this got. So it was getting to the point where I was just ready to be done with the chunkiness and move into something fresh. Plus I got that mid-year fresh start new journal feeling. And then at the end of the year, I'll have the two books to document 2025. So I'm going to go ahead and flip through this entire journal and share with you how I used it and how I felt about it. I do want to preface this by saying I do have flip throughs of each month immediately after the month. So you can go ahead and check those out if you want a little more detail on some of the spreads. But for now, let's go ahead and dive in. So my one little word for 2025 was pause. And so I put that here on the beginning, and this cute sticker from Hubman and Chub Girl. I initially set out with the goal of filling every single page in this journal, and I did not do that, but I tried. I got close. I think I did a pretty good job, and I'm happy with the result. I used this page to track the high temperature of the day. This was kind of fun. This was inspired by All the Rad Reads on Instagram, and she does something similar in her Hobonichi Cousin, not on this page, I don't think, but tracking the high temperature. And I liked it, but I also feel like I wanted to track the lows because it gets more extreme in the winter. I did have a key that was here initially. I took it off of this spread because I moved it into my new journal, and I'm kind of switching up how I'm doing this spread in part 2. Here was the index for the year. So for this, I put kind of a highlight of something that was journaled on that daily page each day. For travel days, I indicated where I was and the date. For days that were not travel, a lot of times I would put on here, if I had some media review, what the media was. Sometimes it was, what was swatched. Other times it was just like something that was going on. And then at the top, I just put like a big highlight of kind of what was going on in that month. Sometimes I had like travel and week in the life. Other times it was just like little things. And then I had a photo of me at the bottom from each month. This has the second half of the year in here. I didn't do anything with this spread. In part 2, I am going to repurpose it so they're both the same 6 months, so I can do 2 separate trackers, but we'll see. Then moving into the monthlies. So you get a couple of extra monthlies in here. This was December 2024, so obviously I didn't need that in my 2025 journal. So I use this as a goal setting page for the year. I love looking back on this. I honestly didn't look back on it that often, but looking back on it now is really fun. I have hit some of these goals. Other ones I've kind of abandoned. Some, I've done some work on. So it's just nice to be able to see this, and I just like how the spread came out. Then moving into the monthlies. So I use the monthlies very similar to how I did in 2024, which is essentially just filling in with some sort of icon collage from something that happened that day. Sometimes it's very obvious. I think this was just remembering stuff that was going on in LA. There were riots going on. This was, I went out on the ladder and took down the lights. Other times, here I was painting in my house. Other times it's not as literal. I'm guessing this was probably I stayed home, took a break this day. It snowed, Trump. And sometimes I just wrote things in because I felt like that would give you a little bit more of the story. Moving into February, the same idea. I am putting these every month using my alphas that I cut out of magazines. And then these are mostly magazine cutouts, stickers, and then again, my word art. Here's March. Using pretty much the same format all year so far. I have been adding washi to the edges because I have a lot of washi and I love it and I want to use it. Here I messed up and put the time change on the wrong one, so I just added it again. April was a little bit less busy. I had some smaller icons. May, we traveled, so I added in some of the destinations. So Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and then I didn't have one for like my house, but visiting my parents. And then June, rather than doing, this is like the only month I did this, rather than doing the collaging, I stamped it because it's very hard to find collage J's, and I was just feeling the stamps that month. So I did that, and I like how that came out. Then it did give you one more monthly. My initial plan for this was to kind of use like themed markers each month and pens and kind of write in what fountain pens I had inked up and with what ink, write down, you know, some color combos to use during the month and have it like throughout the month. I did not stick with this. I didn't stick with the color combos. I totally abandoned this completely, but I like the idea in theory. Then we go into the weeklies. So I pretty much did the same thing every week in here, and I'm going to flip through this a little quicker because otherwise this video will be so long. But I tend to just use this, or I was using this in the same way that I did it in 2024, which was essentially writing down a factual timeline of what actually happened the day. So I did this after the day, usually did 1 or 2 days at a time. And I added little icons and stickers, mostly from the Coffee Monsterz Co, but I definitely mixed in some other brands. And then in the side here, I did highlights of like the big events for the week. And this was mostly used as an overview to remember what happened when. And I could use it as reference when I went back to fill in my daily pages, when I worked on Project Life or other documenting projects, because I am not always completely on top of doing all of those projects right away. So this way I had a quick reference to what happened on that day. This worked really well, and I really like how these spreads look. However, as the year went on, I got bored. I started adding in doodles, which I really like, and I had a little bit of fun with that, but then I needed something different. So I decided to mix it up, and I added in photos. And I loved this for a while. This was so much fun. However, because I can't print I print photos at home, but I can't print just like one at a time because that's a waste of paper. I had to wait and do like a spread at a time, which meant I was like tracking all of this stuff elsewhere. I also at the same time started wanting to document this type of stuff in my Take a Note, because that needed, or it had extra space, and I just felt like it made more sense to put it in there for a reference. So then this kind of became duplicative. I didn't necessarily need this much space each day because a lot of the things was my routine. I did the same thing every day. So I didn't really need to document it. I really just needed to document what was different. And so I was really struggling with these spreads. Then we traveled in May, and I didn't have the ability to print photos while I was traveling. So I did not work on this spread at all while traveling, and I fell pretty far behind. It was only 2 weeks, but like I said, I was bored with these. It was duplicative. I had a lot to catch up on when I got back from my trip, and I stuck it out doing this, but I decided that I'm not going to do this same style anymore. For this was Week in the Life, it was totally duplicative because I documented the entire week in that totally separate project. If you don't know what Week in the Life is, I will leave links in the description box below so you can see my videos on Week in the Life. But essentially, it's a documenting project created by Ellie Edwards, where I created a journal that was documenting that week in much more detail, just to kind of get a picture of what my ordinary life looks like with photos and words and other embellishments. here, moving back to that normal style. I was sticking with it. I was trying to find ways to mix it up and have fun with it, but I was just really, really over it. So I finished out June, moved into the new book, and when I share my flip throughs of that, or there's already some monthly flip throughs available, I think July is already up, and August, at the time you're seeing this, I think that's it. You can go check on my channel, but I will have full flip throughs of those so you can see how I'm using these differently. And then in 2026, my plan is to have a journal that doesn't have weeklies in it. So it's one less spread I need to keep up with. Because as you can tell, I'm a completionist. I want to finish every spread, and that gets very stressful very fast. So then there's that turning the page to a new year spread. I covered that with a vision board for the year. This has my one little word, pause, and just kind of goals and things that I wanted for the year. I really love this. I am definitely going to do one of these for 2026, and I'm going to continue my vision board practice because I love it so much. Moving into the month of January, I always use that landing page for my vision boards. I started this, I think in 2024, maybe 2023. And I do a monthly vision board. And like I said, I'm going to continue that in 2026 because I love it so much. Then I just have my daily pages. My style has evolved a little, and I'm just going to flip through these while I talk because otherwise we'll be here all day. But my style has evolved a little through the year. I can see it looks a little bit different than it does now, but very similar because I've been using a Hobonichi Cousin for a few years now. So I've already kind of found my style. You can see I do a lot of writing. I like to add some big words. I add swatches. I like to paste things in, things that I've printed off the internet, some photos. Not a ton of photos, but I do add some. Washi tape is a favorite. I add in some media reviews. So anytime I finish a book, I will put it in here with my thoughts. I also do that for movie and TV shows. Swatch new washi tape, magazine clippings. This day I did something fun. I just did like an in the news type of recap because a lot was going on in the news around this time in January, and I wanted to remember that. And then I do have some gaps. I don't think I have any fully blank pages in this journal, but I do have some that are not fully completed, and that's okay. I tend to work on filling up the month during the course of the month, so I try to journal every single day. Some days it just doesn't happen. I'm not feeling it or I'm busy, and then I tend to kind of work on filling in those gaps throughout the month. At the end of each month, I'm using these stickers from ABC to do a recap and just kind of do my monthly recap on the last day of the month. Here we go, moving into February. Just trying a few different things to kind of figure out my layouts, how I want my spreads to look, having fun with it. I added in some stamping, not something I do a ton, but I do like to do it occasionally. I like just having different, I guess like tools in my toolbox is kind of what I like to think of it. So as I sit down to work on a spread, I have these various tools that I pull out, things that I've printed off the internet, things I've cut out magazines, stickers, title, larger text, and of course, a lot of journaling. I know a lot of people who use these journals don't do a lot of writing, and other people do a ton of writing. I would say I'm kind of somewhere in the middle because most of my pages do have a decent amount of writing, but I also add in a lot of other stuff. So they're definitely not minimal spreads. I do have a spread here I didn't finish, but that's okay. And then here we went on our first vacation of the year to Doha, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi. I brought my journal with me and I journal on the road. I did film all of these to do and I did share videos of a travel and document with me of these. I do have quite a few of those filmed that I have not yet shared. Hopefully I can get to sharing those with you guys. I love those videos. I have a lot of fun making them, but they're not necessarily as popular as some of my other videos, and they do take a long time to edit. So let me know if you are interested in them, and I will try to work on prioritizing getting those ones out to you because I do have, I think like 4 or 5 that I have filmed and not edited to share. Adding some more media on here, and then wrapping up February, moving into March. So next year, I am going to continue with daily pages, but I did decide to move away from the Hobonichi Cousin, mostly because I don't like this wasted space at the bottom. The quotes started to kind of get to me, and I feel like it just made me struggle with how to kind of break apart my page. You can see I'm always kind of using the set columns that they have, and sometimes that works. Sometimes I'm not entirely sure what to put in that second column and it ends up blank. Here's a day I just did not come back to. Other times, it does work with my layout, but I think I would really prefer to have just a blank page with the date and that's it. So that's what I'm going to do next year. Pumpkin's tail is here. Hi, Pumpkin. This, I think, is one of my favorite pages in here. I just love the combination of big doodles, small doodles, big text. I cut this out of magazines, stickers, but I just don't want this. So I have loved my Hobonichi Cousins. I am so grateful to these journals for giving me this practice of journaling every day, and I'm ready to move on to something new in 2026. Here, first day of spring, putting a bucket list, more journaling, swatching new washi always when it comes in. Just having a lot of fun with it. One of the things that I did change a lot, so you can see here I'm using a lot of gel pens, but here I'm starting to use this brown a lot, and I'm trying to think if this is a fountain pen. Yes. So here I started using my fountain pens a lot because I got this brown fountain pen ink, and I really loved it. And I used it, you can see, for a long time here. I was just obsessed with this fountain pen ink. I finally went back to black because that is just my kind of go-to. But I do struggle a lot with the black ink versus using colorful ink and making the colorful ink work in my spread. I see so many people who do just black ink, and I love it, but I also like mixing it up. Here's a day I went out with my friends, so I got a lot of ephemera to include. That's something I want to work on adding more of. Again, back with that brown. So as you'll see, as I keep going further in here, I'm getting more and more into fountain pens and using them pretty much every spread. Here I got this Diatramentus Archive ink, which is my favorite black fountain pen ink. And now that I have that, I pretty much exclusively use fountain pens, except for potentially while traveling because they are hard to fly with. I decided to swatch all of my markers to fill in some gaps here, so you'll see that. And then I got on the Ferris wheel press team, not entirely sure what they call it, but I have ambassador team, I think, so I get inks from them. So now I'm swatching those and then using those colorful inks. So that kind of pushed me into using more colorful inks in here. And flipping through it, I honestly really like how it looks, mixing in the colorful inks. When I see them online, all to black ink, that is always something that, jumps out to me as beautiful, and that consistency. But for me, I think mixing it up is just the only way that I'm going to be happy with it. Here's where I started to kind of feel over the Hobonichi, so I documented that. And that was kind of where I kind of was starting to think, oh, maybe in 2026, I won't get a Hobonichi. Moving into May, here's a gap, because again, sometimes I just don't know what to do with this column. But I do feel like I love most of the spreads in here. I did do some little doodles, and as I've added more and more doodles, I've just been really happy with that. Here we went on to our next big trip, which was to the West Coast. And again, I brought my journal. I'm adding a lot of journaling while I'm traveling, printing photos with my selfie printer. It's the Selfie Square, and I use that while traveling. I'll link that in the description box below. I don't use it the rest of the time because it is a little bit thicker and they're a little more expensive than what I do to print at home. But I love the ability to put photos in here while traveling, and the photo quality is just amazing. So here's Seattle, and then we did some national parks. Then we went to Portland, another photo. And then here's our last day in Portland, heading to San Francisco. Again, a photo. I feel like my travel spreads are some of my favorites, but I was struggling because I didn't have a fountain pen. I didn't bring any on the plane, but then I bought one in San Francisco, and I was just so happy to have a fountain pen back while journaling in here. Here we go. Then we went to Yosemite. Then we went to Visalia, which is near Sequoia National Park, and we went to Sequoia. And then we came home. And then I think I fell behind in here a little bit, but I eventually did catch up most of these spreads. So I'm pretty proud of myself for that. And then here I'm going into, here's a green ink, which again, I've got my new Ferris wheel press inks, and I was obsessed with the green for a while. Really love how some of these spreads came out. Memorial Day, here's a spread that I didn't quite finish. Like I said, I work on filling gaps throughout the month, and then once the month is done, I kind of close it and turn to the new month. So you're going to see a lot of these gaps towards the end of the month where I just don't fill it in. I did finish the 30th though, and the 31st, and I feel like this is one of my favorite spreads. I love how I did the highlights this month. And this, like, sometimes I just kind of get a crafty bug, and it was raining. It was rained so much this year, so I just felt like I wanted to collage some raindrops, and I had a lot of fun cutting these out of magazines and using my paint pens on there. And then we're into June, trying to fill gaps so that it's not so sparse. I did pretty well though. I think I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. When I had a page that didn't have a lot in it, I did come back and use that to put my documenting of my media. This was Week in the Life, so I had done a little bit of documenting for that in here as the week went on, and I added these were from the Week in the Life kit. I just printed the digital versions and added them in here. And then here, back to not being Week in the Life. Week in the Life kind of, it was right after vacation, so I was still like behind on a lot of things. I think I love this page. I really like just when I do more doodles. I'm not the best at drawing, but I know practice is what I need to do. And the more I practice, the better I get and the more I enjoy it. Sticking with that green ink, adding in more ephemera from life and doodles. I'm really trying to focus on doing that. Again, with the doodles. And adding some photos. This is from the washi tape shop. See, and then here I went out with my friends, adding in ephemera and some photos. I always love these days when I have a lot going on to fill the page. So I don't necessarily journal about my day. Sometimes like this, I did journal because that's, what we did. But other days, it's just what am I thinking about? Random stuff. Here I did a currently inked. Here I was doing my initial thoughts on my 2026 lineup. And honestly, I'm pretty much sticking with this, except this one because they didn't make this for 2026. I got a new one, but I do have a video on my initial 2026 lineup available if you're interested. I will link that in the description box below. And then here we go, adding in more ephemera, really trying to pick up stuff and put it in here, even if it's chunkier like a business card, which is why I'm so happy to have the 2 books for the year. At this point, it was really getting hard to write on this side. I'm happy with how this one came out. And then that was the end of June. Now there's some blank pages here and I had wanted to kind of fill them, but I didn't. So maybe in the next one, we'll see. I did add a little bit here in like February. I think I started thinking about what I wanted in 2026. And some of this has changed. Some of this is the same, but it was kind of fun to have a place to document that. So maybe I will do that next year. I'm thinking that my journal that I'm going to use next year does have some blank pages. So I'm thinking maybe I will make them like dedicated themes that I can add to throughout the year, like 2026 lineup thoughts or something like that. And then you have these extra pages in the back. Most of these I did not use. Here I started to do like all of the media and I just fell off forgot about it. I think in the Avec, because it's only, you get a smaller page, it's so tight. In the My 100 in a cousin goes 2 pages, but now I have one in the other half of the year too. All of these ones, I don't know what to do with these ever. Another reason not to get the Hobonichi. Then my pen test. And I think that's it. Yep, there we go. I covered the back with this vellum from the Coffee Monsterz Co. and added some washi on here to hold it in place. And I decorated the front with the stickers. This yellow was one of the reasons I was unsure about getting the Avec, but honestly, it really grew on me and I don't hate it so much in person. I feel like it looks worse online when you see it. But I also really love the blue color of this, and I don't like the tan of the original Hobonichi, so this was a fun switch up. So that was a look at my first half of 2025 in my completed Hobonichi Cousin Avec. Stay tuned, and I will continue sharing flip throughs of the second half of the year, and I will have a walkthrough of the full year at the end. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye.